Ladies and gentlemen, the following session will be about safety and security in a connected world. But before I introduce the chair to you, I would like to have a few words with Mr. van Roosmalen. Mr. van Roosmalen, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Thank you very much for being a platinum sponsor at this symposium. You are now in your living room in the network app platform. How are you doing?
Yeah, doing great. And we're proud to be the platinum sponsor for this event.
Yes, I can imagine. And what have you noticed the past few days during the symposium?
Well, the symposium is very multifaceted. There's something in there for everyone. One of the things that particularly stuck with me is the remark from Gillian Carson-Jackson, who said that one of the most important skills in the future for the PTSO will be digital skills. And I think it does not only apply to the PTSOs, but everybody in the PTS field. And that also goes for us as a solution provider. It's really easy to cling to a certain way of doing things because you've always done them like that in the past. But what is good for yesterday is not necessarily good for tomorrow. So that's something we're working on very much. Mm-hmm. And it's also something that we would love to exchange ideas with the delegates here at the symposium. So I would say everybody feel free to contact one of us, and we can have discussions about what the future might look like.
And can you maybe explain a little bit more how it works exactly?
So what you can do, for example, is go to our booth. It's on the bottom left in the left-hand menu of the symposium. And when you go onto our booth, you'll see a list of people from our company and what their availability is. And you can just click on them and make an appointment, and then you will be able to come here to our living room here at the symposium, and we can have discussions with up to 10 people at a time.
Perfect. So people can meet with you and your team, but also if they will make an appointment with other participants, they can also be in your living room.
Yeah.
Perfect. And are you serving some drinks and pizza?
Would love to, yeah. It would be great to have a physical event, and I think after a year and a half of not having these events in person, it would be great to have them again.
Yeah.
But it's still very good that this is being organized. I think it's very necessary. We see so much happening out there in the PTS world with the rapid digitalization going on. That it's good to stay in touch with each other.
Absolutely. And it's the new world. It's the world we're living in. So we have to deal with that. Thank you for being here, and have a great time today, but also tomorrow at the closing. And I wish you good luck these days. Thank you, Mr. van Roosmalen.
Thank you. You're welcome.
So many possibilities at the platform. Okay, the second session of today is session number 10, Safety and Security in a Connected World. Connectivity is one of the main themes, so it's going to be a great session again. And this will be chaired by Mr. Neil Trainer. Mr. Trainer was with us on Monday already, and he is currently employed with the Australian Maritime Safety Authority as Principal Advisor of Vessel Traffic Services. He's also chairman of the Australian VTS Advisory Group. And prior to this position, Mr. Trainer was the manager for the Great Barrier Reef and Torres Strait Vessel Traffic Services, a joint initiative by the Australian and Queensland governments. Mr. Trainer, welcome back.
Okay, thank you, Pauline.
Still doing fine?
Yes, all doing well. I think most of us in this part of the world, it's a little bit late, but I don't think anyone's complaining. Everyone's thoroughly enjoying this symposium.
Oh, good. Yeah, what time is it at your continent right now?
Just on 10 p.m.
Okay. Well, let's get started so then you can go to bed afterwards. The floor is yours, Mr. Trainer.
Okay, thank you. Yes, welcome everybody to session 10. Session 10 is entitled Safety and Security in a Connected World. We have three excellent presentations on this very important subject during this session, particularly as we move to an ever-increasing data and information exchange in a digital world. And we've heard a lot about that in the last couple of days. Our first speaker is Jan Henrik Altman. Jan Henrik is the Senior Strategic Advisor to the German Federal Waterways and Shipping Administration. Jan Henrik has a master's degree in electrical engineering from Darmstadt Technical University. Since he joined the German administration in 1993, he has applied diverse technologies to the maritime domain, comprising terrestrial radio navigation, transponder technology, and ICT system architecture. He had an active role in the development of AIS, and I think most people at this symposium would recognise Jan Henrik's contribution to that. He has also managed several domestic and international projects, chaired several international working groups, and is speaker at a variety of international conferences. The title of his presentation is 5G for ENAV and VTS. So, Jan Henrik, over to you.
The topic of my presentation is the question whether the latest generation of mobile telecommunications labeled 5G in the public mind is a useful or desirable tool for the maritime domains of VTS and e-navigation. This is going to be a provocative talk, questioning some traditional tenets of maritime telecommunications in terms of system architecture and systems deployment. My talk starts with the plain fact that 5G is there. The maritime community needs to face that fact. International Mobile Telecommunications, IMT, is a generic term created by the International Telecommunication Union for a family of mobile telecommunication systems developed over more than 3 decades now. It is important to note that IMT systems are all cellular digital land mobile telecommunication systems from the outset, and that their development always engaged ITU's T sector for aspects of the fixed land infrastructure and ITU's R sector for aspects of land mobile radio communications concurrently. It is in particular the Y series of the ITU T sector where system architecture considerations and functionalities are stored, i.e. the description of the so-called core network. There, latest technology developments, including artificial intelligence, are employed to generate the impressive results of IMT 2020. IMT 2020 also comprises a terrestrial segment and a satellite segment. But why bother at all? Because the considerations of application of IMT 2020 to the maritime domain has started in earnest. It was IALA themselves that brought that topic to the attention of IMO in late 2019 by a liaison statement. Now, what can IMT offer to the maritime potentially? What is the relevant part of the big promise of IMT 2020? To answer that question, it is helpful to start at where IMT 2020 started to, i.e. with the use cases and resulting requirements that drove the IMT 2020 development. There are defined 3 dimensions which allow to determine the specific place of a specific use case in the requirements domain. These dimensions are called enhanced mobile broadband, massive machine-type communications, and ultra-reliable and low-latency communications. ITU has determined the specific places in the requirements domain of a variety of use cases as given in the figure in gray. Unfortunately, these use cases do not take into account the maritime domain specifically. Hence, I adapted the generic use cases to the domain of vessel traffic, aids to navigation and other interactions between vessels and waterways, as given by the red overlay. Interestingly, but not really surprising, that domain of vessel shore and vessel waterway interactions produces a use case cluster focusing on highly reliable and low latency communications, with a lower to intermediate degree of bandwidth demands for even its most bandwidth demanding use cases, i.e. voice communications and augmented reality applications. This is good news for the applicability of IMT 2020 to the maritime domain, because it allows for a certain degree of trade-off when considering deployment. A promise, even a big promise, stays only exactly this unless there are concrete steps taken to fulfill that promise. However, over the past years, the most important prerequisites for IMT 2020 have been put into place, such as technical standards, frequency allocations, both globally and individual nations, technologies and operational concepts. Regarding the technology to be deployed in the infrastructure as well as on the user side, products are available on the market on ever-increasing scale. It is very important to note that ITU has acted and continues to act as a gatekeeper, i.e. has evaluated candidate technologies against the requirements introduced earlier, i.e. making sure that the big promise of IMT 2020 can be met actually. Compare brand new recommendation ITUR M2050 as a result. While all of this was done with the generic use cases in mind, the question arises again what this would mean for the maritime domain. All of this might lead to the quick conclusion that IMT 2020 provides the solution for all communication use cases, including the maritime domain. By the way, this is what the name International Mobile Telecommunications implies from the outset. However, maritime folks tend to be reluctant to adapt new technologies rapidly, in particular not when it comes to regulatory issues, and IMO requires that a compelling need be demonstrated beforehand any adoption. So let's do a thought experiment. What if the big promise of IMT 2020 holds true for the domain of vessel shore and vessel waterway interactions as shown above, and that this is proven? Let's look towards the terrestrial segment alone firstly. If so, 2020 would indeed be the one solution for those maritime communication use cases. For many, for most, or even for all? If so, would this not require to abandon the developments of any other maritime communication technologies because the better is the enemy of the good, and join forces to adapt the IMT 2020 to the maritime domain? The previous conclusions hold true for wherever the terrestrial segment of IMT 2020 is available, i.e. everywhere under land or near shore. Even with this limitation, the remaining potential should not be belittled. Compare the remit of IALA. It is essentially defined by underland and or near shore, because administrations of coastal states constitute the national members of IALA. So what could be done to potentially mitigate the above limitations? There are at least the following two options inherent to the IMT 2020, namely the requirements trade-off, which is beneficial for maritime use cases, and the flexible cell concept of IMT 2020. Remember, IMT 2020 is a digital cellular telecommunication system. The public mind has it that IMT 2020 requires a radio tower every 100 meters or so to function properly. This notion may be true for some use cases when approaching the enhanced mobile bandwidth of the IMT 2020 requirements domain as introduced above. This notion is misleading though, when it makes people ignore the inherent flexibility of the IMT 2020 cell concept as depicted in the figure shown. It shows that IMT 2020 has identified so-called macro-rural, macro-suburban, macro-urban, micro-suburban, micro-urban, and even indoor cells. The names speak for themselves in terms of intended application, but only without addressing the maritime domain again. As an initial attempt, I adapted the IMT 2020 defined cell types to the terminology of the domain of vessel shore and vessel waterway interactions in the premises of coastal states as indicated in red overlay. The IMT 2020 defined macro-rural cell might be the concept applicable for coastal waters and around offshore structures, the macro-urban cell concept for the approaches including estuaries and inland waterways, the micro-suburban cell concept for e.g. industrial ports with their remote location, and so forth. Put experts to work to adapt the IMT 2020 cell concept to the maritime domain. Having introduced all of this as a mitigation option, it is still necessary to stress that beyond the reach of a macro-rural cell, i.e. beyond underland or near shore, the terrestrial segment of IMT 2020 would not be available. So these conclusions now prompt the need to take a bird's eye perspective on the radio communication technology landscape depicted in this figure. This figure shows more or less all existing or emerging technologies as applied to the maritime domain in generic terms. The main distinction is between the terrestrial domain in the center of the figure, where also most of the maritime specialties reside, and the satellite domain, which not only complements the terrestrial domain like in the past decades, but is now in a position to potentially replace terrestrial technologies. Anyway, it's getting cozy, and this bird's eye perspective reveals a certain degree of imminent competition of different technologies for similar or even the same purposes in the maritime domain, regardless of where a particular technology originated from in the first place. So the question now is how the maritime domain is going to resolve this in a fruitful manner, taking specifically into account the advent of IMT 2020. Here is my suggestion, part 1. Employ the flexibility of IMT 2020 architecture and thereby the IMT architectural principles. There is no way the shore architectures of the existing maritime radio communication technologies can compete with the IMT architectural principles, in particular not with the powerful functionality of the so-called core network. IMT 2020's architecture is subdivided fundamentally into a core network and the radio access network. The core network is characterized by dealing with all kinds of abstract communication stream flows delivered to non-voice and voice applications alike with the ITU required performance. The radio access network deals with the specialties and challenges of the diverse physical links employed by specific radio access technologies, abbreviated RADs. How nice! There can be many RADs integrated. At IMT, this concept is called a heterogeneous radio access network, or briefly HETNET. Here follows part 2 of my suggestion. Combine the best of the two worlds, i.e. the best of the development strands from maritime developed architecture and maritime tailored radio communication technologies with the best of the IMT 2020 developments, namely the core net and the option to integrate several RADs into one HETNET maritime, my terminology coinage, to be defined internationally eventually. This HETNET maritime would use those RADs provided by IMT 2020 as a default, maybe even as a prime candidate whenever under land, see above, and in addition use the or at least some existing and or emerging maritime RADs. There is one important caveat though, namely the chicken and egg dilemma. Since any radio communication technology is cooperative in nature, both shipboard installations and corresponding shore infrastructure must be there and operational simultaneously. Sounds simple, but where to start? To my assessment, the dilemma can only be resolved by determining the shipboard setup first. Since no stakeholder in the maritime domain wants to and can afford to invest in all technologies concurrently, there must be done a beauty contest of radio communication technologies internationally with the goal of defining the best HETNET maritime. And there is just one international organization where such a beauty contest can result in a firm stipulation of the shipboard setup of the best HETNET maritime at IMO. Of course with the coordinated assistance of ITU, the then IGO IALA and other relevant organizations. I arrive at my conclusions. The advent of IMT 2020 is a fact, and that should prompt considerations how to adapt it to the maritime domain. Let's face it. It is my firm assessment that the terrestrial component of IMT 2020 can do much, most or even all of the job for maritime telecommunications wherever it might be available, i.e. everywhere under land or near shore. By the same token, the single greatest challenge to the adaptation of IMT 2020 to the maritime domain is its availability at or coverage of the maritime domain. Maritime specialties will have their place, at least as bridge technologies for some period of time until migration to IMT 2020 technologies will have been completed, and/or as persistent niche technologies even beyond that point in time. To employ the best of the two worlds, merge maritime RADs with IMT's core network functionality and default IMT 2020 RADs within the framework of overarching e-navigation architecture. The impact of the satellite components on the maritime domain is not yet clear. In particular, the IMT 2020 satellite components may reduce the margin for maritime specialties considerably in the future. The most crucial of all conclusions: define and implement the future shipboard equipment setup as a long-term vision at IMO, prompting the necessary shore infrastructure deployment in due course may be guided by a then IGO IALA. Define concurrently the best net maritime and migration paths leading to it. Much needs to be discussed and much can be added to support my case. To potentially stimulate any discussion, I provide this iconic summary of my main point. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Oldman. Back to you, Mr. Trainer.
Okay, thank you again, Pauline, and thank you, John Henrik, for a very informative presentation on 5G and adopting it into the maritime domain. And I think it was also useful highlighting towards the end of your presentation the importance of addressing shipboard capabilities. Our second speaker in this session is Todd Schuett. Todd is the Innovation Projects Manager at Kongsberg Norcontrol, a graduate of the University of Chicago. He joined Kongsberg Norcontrol in 2000 and for several years managed the VTS training programs. In 2012, he began managing innovative projects, which have included the Sesame eNav projects in Norway and the next generation VTMS lab in Singapore. He is an active member of IALA, the Navigation Committee, and has served on the IALA e-learning workshop, as well as the IALA V103 workshops. Todd, over to you.
My name is Todd Schuett, the Innovation Projects Manager at Kongsberg Norcontrol, and the Project Manager for the e-navigation testbed project called Sesame Solution 2, which follows in the footsteps of the Sesame Straits project. Today I would like to tell you a tale of 5 vessels soon to join the testbed. These vessels shall not be named because that's not the point. Rather, they should be considered as different types of vessels who might use e-navigation technologies in different ways to help them accomplish their objectives. But before I can tell you this tale of 5 vessels, I must first tell you a little bit more about the Sesame Solution 2 project. For it was an e-navigation testbed project with big ambitions. The project was born in Norway, and as with so many things Norwegian, had international ambitions. A dream of building on the work of Sesame Straits, but to go further, developing the most complete e-navigation technology solution that is possible to develop at this time, using the existing standards and seeking interoperability in the highest degree in order to facilitate shared situational awareness and collaborative decision support. The project named itself Sesame Solution 2 after Solution 2 in IMO's strategy implementation plan for e-navigation. Solution 2 being automated electronic ship reporting. The tale of 5 vessels begins on shore. For if a group is to accomplish this lofty ambition of building the most complete e-navigation solution possible, the project needs partners to develop systems and services for ships, shore authorities, communications, and a human factors team to delve into the mysteries of how humans interact with systems and give the engineers insight into what operators really and truly want. And of course, the project would need the support of the maritime authorities if it was to have any credibility at all. Fortunately, both Norwegian maritime authorities stepped forward to participate: the Norwegian Coastal Administration and the Norwegian Maritime Authority. The technology providers came from the Norwegian maritime technology industry. Navtor lent its expertise in chart services, as well as its nav station for planning all aspects of a voyage. Kongsberg Maritime added its bridge systems, namely the KM Ectus, as well as experience in creating prototypes. Kongsberg Seatex, of course, brought its VDS technology to the table. And Kongsberg Norcontrol, as the owner and manager of the project, contributed VTS and management information systems. The human factors team from the Norwegian University of Science and Technology, the Western Norway University of Applied Sciences, and the University of Southeastern Norway reminded the engineers that people would be using these systems, and they needed to provide value, be easy to use, and to address real needs. And so with the characters cast and the goal identified, the project set out to develop services. The primary two services were to be, first, an automated and electronic ship reporting service to a single window, with the effort being led by the Norwegian Coastal Administration. And second, a just-in-time arrival service that enabled collaboration with arrival service providers, such as tugs, pilots, and berth operators. Several additional services were identified as ripe for development, and here you can see these services. Some of these services can be offered by a commercial entity, while others would be more appropriately offered by a competent authority. And the project made a decision to offer most of these services through the Naval Link platform. Offering the maritime services through the Naval Link platform ensures interoperability. Over time, the project identified areas where these services would be offered. As a Norwegian project, the BAREP mandatory reporting system was an obvious candidate for automated electronic ship reporting, as well as 3 of Norway's VTS centers in Horten, Kvitsøy, and the Arctic VTS known as Vardø. But remember, the project had international ambitions, and so we looked beyond the borders of Norway, and first to the UK, where the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency's Channel Navigation Information System at Dover, at the narrowest part of the English Channel, is responsible for the CalDovrep mandatory reporting system, as well as Singapore's Maritime and Port Authority with the StraitRep for the Straits of Singapore. Both have joined the project, and that expands the automated mandatory reporting systems in the testbed from 1 to 3. And last but not least, the Associated British Ports, or ABP, the UK's leading port operator, offered the Humber VTS for a just-in-time arrival testbed location. For the tale of 5 vessels, the characters were cast, the services identified, and the locations were named. So the next step was to identify what systems would deliver the services and what systems would receive. The shore systems would be first. The Norwegian Coastal Administration's maritime single window called SafeSeaNet Norway. The service for automated reporting to BAREP was the first service released in the project and is now running on SafeSeaNet Norway. For those who want more information about this service, Jarle Hauge of the Norwegian Coastal Administration will present an input paper tomorrow to the ARM Committee. For other shore systems and services, the Seascope Management Information System developed by Kongsberg Norcontrol would handle the CalDove rep and straight rep mandatory reporting systems in the test bed, as well as communicate with the just-in-time arrival collaborator, or the JIT collaborator app, used by both floating and landed arrival service providers. And the Kongsberg CTEX VDS base station would support communications. The ship systems, as it turned out, would be many. Kongsberg Maritime's ECDIS would be limited to displaying routes sent and received between both ship and shore. The JIT collaborator, an app running on a tablet, would be used both on vessels and on shore to enable collaboration between arrival service providers. The Navtor Nav station would be responsible for automated ship reporting, as well as chart and weather updates. Kongsberg CTEX provided their VDS mobile unit, enabled for both terrestrial and satellite VDS communications. And Kongsberg Maritime developed a prototype of something we call HD Nice. HD Nice is an acronym that stands for the Harmonized Display of Navigation Information Received via Communications Equipment. And if ever there was a name of something that begged for an acronym, it would be that name. HD Nice is a new ship system. It was developed as a prototype in the Sesame project to support the Norwegian Maritime Authority's initiative in IMO concerning a harmonized display of navigation information. The purpose of HD Nice is to display the legacy navigation information communications such as Navtex, as well as maritime safety information and other navigational warnings. But we have found that HD Nice serves well as a sort of hub, relieving the ECDIS from being burdened by an overabundance of e-navigation information, while serving as an important link between the back of bridge planning station and the front of bridge ECDIS. This is a tale of 5 vessels, and of course no e-navigation testbed is complete without vessels. So, with the characters cast, services, locations, and systems identified, the vessels, waiting patiently in the wings, can now join this tale. The first vessel to enter is a reefer, operating primarily along the coast of Norway. This vessel is equipped with the nav station, and through the nav station will be able to report in an automated way to bar rep, as well as receive regular chart updates, weather information, and maritime safety information. By automating reporting and harmonizing the display of safety information, the intention is that the vessel will sail more safely, as the bridge team can devote its attention to safe navigation instead of the more tedious tasks of reporting and looking up information. The next vessel on stage is a ferry operating in the Oslo Fjord. Ferries are good testbed vessels because they make short journeys. They're usually fairly easy to board if you need to install equipment, and they make the same journey, in this case twice a day, which means the shore infrastructure does not go unutilized for long periods of time. As the ferry sails from one side of the fjord to the other, a journey of approximately 3 hours, she will use the Kongsberg ECDIS, HD Nice, and VDS mobile unit, which will enable her to receive reference routes from the VTS, as well as maritime safety information and navigational warnings. The Trondheim Test Fjord vessel, also known as the Ocean Space Project, will have a full complement of equipment, and with this vessel, we plan to test use of satellite and terrestrial VDS for sending all types of e-navigation information, such as ship reports, maritime safety information, and the reference routes. The test bed would not be complete without an arrival service provider, and so this tugboat is just one of several to carry a tablet on board with the Just-in-Time Arrival Collaborator, or JIT Collaborator. With the JIT Collaborator, the tug will be able to accept jobs in the Hummer estuary, indicate its readiness, start and stop a job, and see the status of other service providers on the same job, including how long they have to finish. The aim is that by using this JIT Collaborator, all service providers will work smarter and more efficiently. We hope to see bottlenecks and delays identified earlier, and voice communications reduced, and some being replaced altogether with text messages. The final vessel is a ro-ro, sailing nearly every ocean. This vessel, equipped with the nav station, will be able to report at bar rep, Caldove rep, and straight rep, as well as receive chart updates, weather data, and maritime safety information. And this is where we see a true revolution. For these mandatory reporting systems are developed by different technology providers, yet they are harmonized so that the ship doesn't have to use multiple systems for reporting, but can satisfy any and all mandatory reporting requirements with one system and reporting in one way. When reporting services are harmonized, this becomes possible. So what does the future hold for our merry band of 5 vessels and shore stations? The possibilities might not be endless, but they are promising. When reporting is automated and includes pre-arrival reporting, vessels will be less likely to experience delays and detentions due to incomplete or inaccurate reporting. When route information is shared between ship and shore and ship operators are more likely to share the same understanding of the situation, which makes collaborative decision support possible. And when maritime services are digitalized and their display is harmonized, mariners are more likely to get the information they require in a way that is more easily comprehended. And VTS operators will be able to share information in a form such as draw objects in geo-referenced areas that visualize the information service that has been, up until now, shared only by VHF and the occasional AIS message. And of course, the ultimate goal is fewer accidents at sea, less damage to the environment, and a reduction in pollution. So these 5 vessels, and others like them, are a growing number of actors leading the digital transformation of maritime transportation, and it has been my pleasure to lead this project. The Sesame Solution 2 testbed will continue until the end of this year, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you. Yeah, hopefully there will be some questions posted later on so we can address them to the right guest speaker. Well, back to you, Mr. Trainer, and to the final presenter.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Todd, for your presentation on automated reporting and how vessels can actually embrace digital maritime services. Our next speaker is Martin Ibn. Martin is a cybersecurity and risk officer at the Port of Rotterdam. He's part of a team of security officers that all have a specific business focus. And Martin's is the mission-critical infrastructure services such as radar, BHF, and sensors. He's responsible for policy, enforcement, and implementation, such as the cybersecurity strategy, and is involved in all projects and day-to-day operational management of the VTS systems. Martin's title is Cybersecurity in VTS. Over to you, Martin.
Hi there. Warm welcome from my home office near Rotterdam. Today I'm going to tell you something about cybersecurity in VTS. I'm not going to tell you how we did things at the port of Rotterdam, but I am going to tell you about some best practices. First of all, why would someone want to hurt your port? Why would someone actually want to bring your VTS down? Well, first of all, it might just happen by accident. Things like ransomware do not target your port directly or your VTS systems. It just happens, and they want some bitcoins and they want to make money out of it, and it happens. But it also may be deliberate. You may have an unhappy employee, but there are other nations maybe, or there may be terrorism or what we call hacktivism that might impact your port. This is one of the few slides I have for you with a lot of text on it, because it's important to know what is different in this world with VTS. I mean, we have it for a lot of years, VTS, and why is cybersecurity more important than ever? Well, first of all, good to know, like every IT system, VTS is an IT system these days, and it can be hacked and it can be disrupted. But there's an increasing chance, mostly because systems get interconnected all the time. Much more external connections are with other VTS systems or other authorities. And there are more dependencies. It's not really today, but it's coming that autonomous ships will be sailing our ports. And if we cannot communicate in the right manner with them, they might bump into another ship. So it's more and more important that our VTS systems are protected for that. And the big, well, how to say it, the big problem we have is that VTS systems have always been built for stability, for operation, and lesser for security. That is changing, but it's the most important reason why I have this presentation today, as there's a lot of work to do still. And yes, it does happen. I'm not saying these are all VTS related, some are just terminals that are hit, but it does have quite an impact. This is what can happen. This is a photo that was taken some weeks ago in Rotterdam. It was not related by a security incident or whatever, it had another reason. But this is what you get. Not only problems on the water, but long lines of trucks. And like I say here, your dinner might be in one of them. What is your enemy? What's the biggest risks you actually have? Well, first of all, people. And most of them by accident. Just your VTS operators or maybe your personnel managing the system might just do something that breaks your system. And that is actually what's most important. And people are always thinking about firewalls and other technical measures, but please start with your people. That's really the most important. And like I said before, you can also have someone, an employee that's not so happy and for some reason decides to break something. And that's also something you can prevent. Secondly, criminals looking to make money. Ransomware is, I guess, the most happening cyber incident these days. And it might hit your VTS systems as much as your office environment. Hacktivism, vandalism, terrorism, something, it happens, and it's maybe not even digital. It might be someone at the door of your VTS center chaining themselves in there. And finally, espionage and state actors or other nations, they are not that harmful usually. They don't want you to see them, but they can hack into your system. So from here, it's mainly what can we do to prevent it. Well, the most important, in my opinion, but it's generally accepted, is educate your people. especially your VTS operators and the people managing your systems. Teach them on dangerous behavior. It's often small things, but I've seen people charge their phone on a VTS computer. It's not a good idea. It's not only the power that's coming from it, it's also data connection and what is on those phones. You never know. Also, browsing the internet from a VTS workstation or online shopping when there's not much chips and you have some time left is not a good idea. And even I don't even think you should be able to access the internet from your VTS system, but there are VTS systems that have it. And yes, it seems so obvious, but cybersecurity often starts with physical security. It's not only locks, it's also access policies. Who has the keys to your VTS center? Do you actually know who has access? For sure. That VTS operator that started a new job a week ago, is she still able to log into your system? And did you actually disable it? Just make sure you know who can access it, and especially maintenance personnel, so the people managing it, but also externals. Besides that, configure all accounts that are used in your VTS system with the least privilege. That means only allow them to use what's actually needed to do the work. Why would a VTS operator ever need a command line? Disable that. And you should take measures to know who you can trust. Perform background checks if allowed in your company, and especially for your external personnel. Let them prove that their personnel is trustworthy. Most VTS systems were built for stability, and you might think, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. And that happens very often. But often it is broken without you knowing it. There are a lot of security bugs and vulnerabilities, and they are never patched in VTS systems. That is something, it's done for stability, but it's still a risk. And the incidents might be very much severe, and you can prevent that. But even if you decide not to patch, make sure you know what vulnerabilities there are. Have your list. Know what's the risk on your system, so you can take other measures, maybe workarounds, implement a firewall to prevent any impact. That's all things that happen. Also, make sure related systems are patched. A UPS, just to keep your systems running, it's often connected to the network. Those have patches too. Your out-of-band management from a server, like an IALA or IPMI interface. Those all are patched for security bugs, and don't forget them. Have a complete inventory of everything you have, and have a list of bugs there are and things you can do, and if possible, apply those patches. A good resource to get your patches is the US CERT. It's a computer emergency response team, and they have a lot of mailing lists you can subscribe to. Keep safe distance. That is, for VTS systems, very important, and it's not physical distance, of course, but have them separated. Keep them separated from your office systems. Keep them separated from your Windows environment, and have some firewalls implemented. If possible, don't connect them at all. No physical connections to other networks. But yes, I know there are a lot of interconnections to other systems these days, so you may have to interconnect them, but keep those connections as small as possible. And also, I mentioned UPSs and out-of-band management systems before. Have those in separate networks. How do you manage inactivity timeouts on your VTS system? Usually, a VTS system does not lock automatically. And obviously, obviously, if a VTS operator is watching the traffic on his display, you don't want it to lock automatically. So that's understandable. But how about after 10 hours? Will he actually not move the mouse for 10 hours? In the picture here, you see a VTS center, which is empty. There's no one there. But every system is locked onto. Why is that needed? Some cleaning personnel might come in there. And are they screened as well as your own personnel? So think about what is sensible. You can implement an inactivity timeout in several hours, and especially if you have some backup VTS space, there will be no one in there. Maybe most important is monitor what you have. Monitor who's logging into your systems, monitor those firewalls, and have them send alerts and things like that if something out of the ordinary happens. I've seen a lot of implementations of a lot of security equipment and technical stuff, but no one watching them. So if something bad happens, it still happened. Have your backups. VTS systems are usually real-time systems, so not much to do in the sense of backups, but there might be a specific configuration. Make sure you have that offsite on the tape or something. And make sure you can actually recover it and test that. Can you, when all your systems have been locked, for instance with ransomware, are you sure you can reinstall them in a timely manner and that you have the right configuration at hand? And then there are a lot of things you can do anything about. The picture you see here is an incident that happened on the coast of Corsica some years ago. And this was AES spoofing. Someone, for some reason, sent out a lot of AES tracks, which completely cloaked the map. And it might have been for some fishing boat that didn't want to be discovered there or anything. But this is a problem. And what can you do about this? Absolutely nothing. I can use this device. It's just a VHF handheld transceiver. I can use it to block the communication of the VTS. That's very easy. And yes, new technologies are coming. We're working on VDES, which improves a lot of things, but it still can happen. Have your plans ready. Maybe binoculars and a handheld thing can help. Or maybe you can switch off the AES transceivers and just work on your radar if you have both. Those are things to think about and know how to activate them quickly whenever needed. This is the most common way to address cybersecurity. If you don't know where to start, make your list of risks and just go with a couple of people in a room and make your list. And then for every risk you can think of, say what's the likelihood of occurring and what's the consequences. Then you plot them in a matrix like this, and they will end up in the top right corner or in some other place, and then you can prioritize them. Just start with what's the highest risk. And then, of course, you don't have to do it alone. There are a lot of companies that can help you. And a lot of cybersecurity specialists. There are a lot of standards, but many of the companies that are specialized in cybersecurity are not specialized in a vital system like a VTS system. Make sure that if you call for help, that they have the right knowledge to actually help you. So, I would like to thank you and hope to see you in real life very soon all again. Bye.
Thank you very much. Yeah, that's what we are hoping too, right? Huh, Mr. Trainer, to see each other in real life. That would be nice.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you. Is there anything that you would like to add or?
Just to thank Martin for, I think, what was a very practical presentation on cybersecurity and the threat it does pose as we face, increasing connectivity. it's quite good to see a lot of very practical suggestions there. So yes, thank you, Martin.
Yeah, it was a great presentation.
Yeah, and I'm just noting the time, so I might just hand back over to you, Pauline.
Thank you very much.
We're running close to our time limit.
Yeah, and thank you very much for being twice with us this week, and I hope to see you or that you are around tomorrow in the final day with the closing ceremony. Thank you very much and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
So we will be back at 1:20 with our next session of today, VTS training and certification. So we'll be right back. Thank you.